There's something fascinating about Apple. Apple is one of the most profitable companies in the world. Year after year, it generates tens of billions of dollars in profit. But here's the surprising part. Apple isn't the company that sells the most smartphones. In fact, in many cases, its products are significantly more expensive than the competition. So why do people keep buying them? Why do hundreds of millions of people continue to choose the iPhone? Why are they willing to pay more? And most importantly, what allows Apple to maintain profit margins that most businesses can only dream of? If you ask the average person, they would probably say, because of the iPhone. And that sounds reasonable, but that's only part of the story. The truth is, the iPhone is just the tip of the iceberg. Behind it lies an entire system. A system that has been built over decades. A system that helps Apple make money, even when you don't buy a new phone. And once you understand how that system works, you'll realize something important. Apple isn't just a technology company. It's one of the most efficient money-making machines ever created. When you hear the word Apple, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Maybe the iPhone, maybe the MacBook, the Apple Watch, or the iPad. Those are Apple's most famous products. But the most interesting thing about Apple isn't its products. It's profits. Imagine this. There are two smartphone companies. The first company sells a huge number of devices. Its sales are massive, but its profits are relatively small. The second company sells fewer phones, yet somehow makes far more money. It sounds almost impossible, but that's exactly what's happening in the smartphone industry. For years, Apple has controlled only a portion of the market, yet captured a huge share of the industry's profits. Take a moment and think about that. Fewer customers, but more profit. That's not luck. That's strategy. Apple isn't trying to sell to the most people. It's trying to create the most value from each customer. Those are two completely different games. One focuses on volume. The other focuses on revenue quality. And Apple chose the second path. That's one of the biggest reasons why it has maintained profit margins that most competitors can never reach. But that raises another question. If Apple isn't focused on selling the most devices, then what is Apple really selling? And that's where the story becomes much more interesting. Imagine you've just bought your first iPhone. At first, it's just a phone, but then you buy AirPods because they're incredibly convenient. Then comes the Apple Watch, then a MacBook, maybe an iPad, and eventually iCloud. One product appears after another. One service gets added after another. And before you realize it, everything is connected. Your photos sync automatically. Your messages appear across all your devices. Files move from your phone to your laptop in seconds. Everything becomes so seamless. You almost forget it's even happening. And that's exactly what Apple wants. This isn't an accident. It's the result of a strategy that has been developing for decades. Apple doesn't just sell products. It builds an ecosystem. An ecosystem where every product makes the next product more useful. An ecosystem where every service makes leaving just a little bit harder. Over time, customers stop simply buying devices. They're investing in an entire digital lifestyle. And that's why Apple is so good at retaining customers. But there's still one big question. If competitors also make great phones, why are customers still willing to pay more for Apple? If you look only at specifications, Apple isn't always the leader. There are always smartphones on the market that are cheaper, sometimes more powerful, sometimes packed with more features. And yet, millions of people still choose the iPhone. Why? Because Apple doesn't compete on specifications. Apple competes on perception. When someone buys an iPhone, they're not just buying hardware. They're buying peace of mind. They know the device will work reliably. They know it will receive updates for years. They know they won't have to spend time worrying about countless technical issues. And that has value. A lot of value. Over the years, Apple has achieved something most businesses only dream of. It transformed its brand into a symbol of trust. When people see the Apple logo, they already know what to expect. A familiar experience. A polished product. A premium feeling. It's not much different from luxury cars or high-end watches. People don't just buy the product. They buy the feeling that comes with it. And Apple understands that better than almost anyone. But a strong brand alone isn't enough. Because behind all of this is a massive operating machine, one that most customers never even see. Take a look inside an iPhone. You'll find hundreds of components: the display, the cameras, the processor, the battery, sensors, and countless other parts. All of them need to be manufactured, assembled, tested, and shipped around the world. It sounds expensive, and it is, but Apple has an advantage that very few companies possess: scale, massive scale. When you're producing hundreds of millions of devices every year, you gain tremendous leverage. You can negotiate better prices, purchase components more efficiently, optimize logistics, and if you save just a few dollars on every device, you can save billions of dollars overall. That's something Apple does exceptionally well. But that's not all. Apple manages its supply chain with near-obsessive precision. From design, to manufacturing, to distribution, every process is continuously optimized. Every cost is carefully monitored. This isn't the most exciting part of the story, but it's where a huge amount of profit is created. And then, Apple does something even smarter. It finds a way to keep making money, long after the iPhone has already been sold. For many years, Apple was known as a hardware company. A company that sold smartphones, laptops, and tablets. But today, that description is no longer entirely accurate, because behind every iPhone is an entire ecosystem of services. The App Store, iCloud, Apple Music, Apple TV+, Apple Pay, and many more. At first glance, these may seem like simple add-ons, but in reality, they are one of Apple's most powerful profit engines. Think about it. When Apple sells an iPhone, it earns revenue once. But when you pay for iCloud, Apple earns money every month. When you subscribe to Apple Music, Apple earns money every month. When you purchase an app from the App Store, Apple earns money again, and again, and again, year after year. This is what businesses call recurring revenue. And in the business world, it's one of the most valuable revenue streams imaginable, because it's predictable, stable, and often highly profitable. What does that mean? It means every new Apple customer isn't just a customer. They're a source of revenue for years to come. And that's when the ecosystem reveals its true power. But there's still one final piece of the puzzle. Perhaps the most important piece of all. If you had to summarize Apple's success in a single word, it would be this: trust. It sounds simple, but trust is incredibly difficult to build, and even harder to maintain. Customers trust Apple. They trust its products, its services, its experience. They trust that when they buy an Apple product, they'll get exactly what they expect. And that trust creates loyalty. Loyalty creates revenue. Revenue creates profit. And profit is reinvested to create even better experiences. A nearly perfect cycle. That's why competitors can copy features. They can copy designs. They can even copy hardware. But it's incredibly difficult to copy what Apple has spent decades building: trust. And that trust has become one of the strongest competitive advantages in the world. So what's the secret behind Apple's massive profit margins? It's not just the iPhone. It's not just the brand. And it's not just the services. It's the combination of all of them. A powerful ecosystem, a premium brand, an incredibly efficient operation, a massive recurring revenue engine, and above all, customer trust. Apple didn't become one of the most profitable companies in the world simply by selling smartphones. Apple became Apple because it built an entire world, a world that hundreds of millions of customers never want to leave. And that is the real secret behind Apple's massive profit margins.